Hello, this is Linda Vettrus-Nichols, and do I have an amazing woman to introduce you to, Catherine Fitzgerald. Welcome, Catherine.
Oh, thank you, Linda. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely honored to have you. You have the coolest slide here from your website. Oh my gosh. Tell me a little bit more about it. I know it's from Australia and it's the Sydney Opera House, right?
That's right. That's right. I tell you, that is a very significant picture because I took it myself
Okay.
on my very first trip internationally by myself.
Wow.
And I did that about 3.5 years ago. And it
Okay.
really opened my mind in a way that I was very unexpected. I went on an adventure for 10 days and, my children were all kind of, what is she doing? Why is she going on vacation by herself? Because I had never done that, including my,
Right?
Many women, I think, on their a monumental birthday, which starts with 5, do
Oh,
something.
that one?
Yeah, that
That
one.
was a long time ago on this end. 14 years ago, that one.
Well, many people do something personally, for
Yeah.
themselves during that
Yeah.
time. I did
My
not.
mom started traveling in her 50s. Go ahead.
Yeah, I took my sons on vacation, which was kind of I loved it. They were wonderful, but it was not my vacation. It was their vacation, And so this kind of evolved out of a desire for me to just explore something that was in my heart and go for it. And so I went to Sydney, and during my trip, I took a tour of the Opera House, like the origins of the Opera House. How did it come to be? And the story of the architect and his design and how he entered a contest. He's not even an Australian. He's from the Netherlands, I believe. I can't quite recall at this point. Anyway, or Norway, maybe. He came to designing this through, he just designed it in his mind, but there was no engineering that had ever done what he designed. So the picture he drew won the contest, but nobody knew how to build it. So it began an odyssey of many years of them, trying different things and creating the Opera House. And then there was all kinds of political battles and money and all kinds of stuff. It's just an incredible story. And I think they should make a movie out of it, but they haven't. But for me, it became kind of a cathartic experience because here I am in a new chapter of my life, becoming a coach and having gone on this vacation for myself. And it was the most amazing time because I didn't have to ask anybody what they wanted to do in the morning. I got to decide and then go do it. And that was the first time since I was in my late teens that I was actually able to do that.
Wow.
And so, it was really monumental in my life. And so that's why it's there. And I'm sure it's like, oh, she must be Australian. No, I'm an American who went there and had a life-changing experience.
Oh, that is just the coolest. I love it. What a great story. Your story and the architect. Well, the guy, he's not an architect, right? That guy's story too.
So unbelievable.
Cool. Very, very, very. Okay, so your actual story of transformation then, like from when you were even little, right? I know a little bit about you. You had kind of like even like your upbringing and stuff. Would love to have you share a little bit about that, your Irish background.
Yes, I come from what I would call, a biologically volatile background in that my genetics are Irish and Czech and French and English, but Irish and Czech are the ones that I really resonate with. And both of them are, known for their exuberance in both love and anger.
Ooh, there you go.
So I grew up with being the oldest of 3 children, and my middle sibling, who was my brother, passed away when he was 18 years old, and I was 25. Wow. And it was just, actually 23. He was born with muscular dystrophy, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And when I was young, like under 10 years of age, my mother, you know, and dad found out that my brother's life expectancy was between 13 and 18, and that he would be confined to a wheelchair within a very short amount of time of him learning to walk. So between 7 and 10, he was walking, and by 10, he was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And so it was a progressively degenerative disease.
Right.
But it was all on his muscles. It was not his brain. So he was brilliant, and he was an incredible, wow, what do I want to say? He was a thought leader even in his young life. And you know, there were many lessons that my brother taught me, but one particularly was perspective about humanity and humility and vulnerability. And you know, it wasn't in the moment that I recognized it. It was really in looking backwards and recognizing my own personal predisposition towards, I can do it myself, I'm self-contained, I've got this, and recognizing that vulnerability and humility are part of our humanity that are probably the most accessible for us in relation to other humans.
Oh, and people really relate to that. They don't relate to our perfectionism. That's
exactly. And that inner critic, you know, was in full force in my life, because I was the oldest of three, and you know, all the hopes and dreams of your children, you do put on them expectations, and you know, you try to help them be the best they can be by reevaluating the plays that have happened and how you could improve what you were doing, you know. So that inner critic voice has been always very strong, and that has not always been my best friend. And so I think that in recognizing one of the things is how hard it is to accept help. And then looking at my brother and realizing that he spent his life needing help. And he did it with such grace and such incredible ability to just accept what was going on. And so that's a life lesson that really resonated with me.
Oh, that right there is a beautiful story. I'll interject real quick. I worked in a psychiatric day treatment center, and when my boss's boss said she hired someone in a wheelchair, we were all like, what? These kids were very violent. Like, we just saw them like picking up our wheelchair and throwing her across the room, right? Well, you can't really do that with a motorized wheelchair too easily.
That's right.
They never laid a finger on her. Never. And that was born with muscular dystrophy. She didn't even have the ability to like reach her arms forward. She had a service dog with her. She ended up like taking pills so she get her period like once a year and just take a week off of work. And she had a surgery where she urinated through a tube. She could just stick a tube. When she had to go to the bathroom, she'd just stick a tube in her belly button and pee.
Oh my goodness.
Save number 2 for at home. And she was so independent. She ended up learning to drive with the hand things, and you know, getting her driver's license and all kinds of stuff. And so when she'd correct papers, she'd get her arms up. She could go this way with her muscles, but she couldn't go forward. So she'd just get her hands on the table, and then she'd crawl her fingers forward. And then she could correct the papers. It was just amazing. The independence.
My brother was very much the same in that he could not, you know, he couldn't scratch his nose if it itched, you know. And so the whole process of his life, and, you know, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's like 46 different types of neuromuscular disorders under the umbrella of muscular dystrophy.
Wow.
And so he had one of the most severe. So ALS used to be under MDA, but now they're, you know, Lou Gehrig's disease. But Duchenne is the, you know, the equivalent, but in a longer period of time. Like ALS is usually 2 to 3 years, and it hits at adulthood, whereas this isn't, at birth, and it
Right.
progressively degenerates. And what happens is their growth outstrips their degeneration between age 7 and 10. And so
Okay.
they do have the ability to walk for a little bit, but then they end up back in a wheelchair because their growth is, their degeneration outstrips the growth. And then they end up in a chair the rest of their life. And most of them don't die of muscular dystrophy. They die of a
Complications of it.
secondary infection,
Sure.
like pneumonia or the flu or, something like that. But my brother actually had his heart muscle give out, and he was at school the day he died. He was, and he didn't die at school. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital and died at the hospital. But he lived every day until he died. And that's another message to me that, regardless of what is going on in your life, you have choices. And he chose always to live with an optimistic spirit. But he was an artist. And so I have a lot of his artwork. And he drew one in particular that was him sitting in his electric wheelchair with he had a acrylic desktop that had an edge on it, and his control was in the center. But he drew a photo, looks like it's a pen and ink, but it looks like a photograph of his arms and the desk and his controller looking from his perspective at his body, including his legs and his feet. And, and it's so telling of, that his world was very, limited, and yet he was brilliant, and he was always learning, and he was always very interested in other people and other things and science and the world. And so that was always a great message. But I think, that also was a spur in my life, because we were always very focused on trying to find a cure from MD. And I became a state youth rep for muscular dystrophy when I was 16 years old. And then was interviewed because of a series of other things on the national telethon, and met Jerry Lewis and met David Hartman, and really learned how to convey word pictures, stories that resonate with people. And so that's, and always, I think, leading with heart is, setting the example by talking about the real stuff, not the surface stuff,
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Hey, quick question. Are you familiar with the movie Lorenzo's Oil?
Yes, I watched it.
I bet you
and
loved that.
I wept through it, actually.
Well, yeah. When did you see it? Before or after your brother died?
After, my brother died in 1986. So he's been gone a long time. It's hard. It's staggering for me. He would be 53 years old this year. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's funny when people die, because like my dad died at 42. So when I hit 42, I went, oh my gosh, he really was young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Woof.
Absolutely.
So very cool. Yeah. So this whole leading with heart thing comes, you come by it honestly.
Yeah.
Quite the history of leading with heart. Very good. Okay, so let's keep going on your journey then.
Sure. So then I went off to college at UCLA when I was 17, and that was probably the first time in my life I was like the dog that caught the pickup truck. I wanted to go there more than anything. That's where my brother was diagnosed, and that's where our family went on a regular basis for tests when I was young, very young. And my mother always said, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And I decided, I didn't know about university, except for that she had planted a seed that I wanted to go, that I could go to college. She went to college. She was the first woman in her family to go to college. And so she very much said, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. And so when I went to UCLA, I didn't apply anywhere else, which my sons find absolutely confounding, that I would have taken that giant risk of not being accepted. But in my mind, it was like, I put my mind to it, I'm going to do it. And thankfully, I did get in. But I was 17 and I got to Los Angeles and had lived in a very small town in Fresno, California. And my perspective of the world was, although I had, done a little bit of traveling, I'd flown to New York to be interviewed and that kind of thing this summer before I went. I thought I knew everything, but I got there and boy, that was a whole different experience.
Oh,
And so I spent, 5 years in LA, 4.5, and came back home.
wow.
And so I've raised three sons. They're 19, 20, 23, and 27. This is the odd year. Next year will be the even year. They all turn an even age. And I am, embarking over the last 2 years on a coaching career, and started my own company. And my focus really is helping people to embrace the possibilities of their life. And I have been in many different roles in my life from a career standpoint. And I was in health insurance early on as a regional sales manager. It's your classic promotion that happens because you're really good at something. Now we're going to make you in charge of everybody else who's doing that. And that's not always a great translation. Because you're good at something, you're a good doer, doesn't mean you're a good leader, even though you may have, great qualities that could be developed as a leader without the perspective that you've now relinquished your job as a doer and you've become a developer of other people who are doers. That whole transition, that mindset between leadership and employee. And so engaging teams and working with teams was something that I learned by making a lot of mistakes.
You're right.
And so then I stayed home with my kids, and I started to work for a nonprofit, and did a lot of grant writing and working on, keeping a nonprofit afloat for a while, a very small one, but it was 5 children's choirs, K through 12. And I took 65 kids to Europe and their parents, which was a bundle of excitement. And we partnered with Placido Domingo's LA Opera and had his star soprano come to Fresno and sing with our children's choir. And, we did a lot of things that were really big for a little tiny nonprofit. And then I kind of stayed home with my third son until he went to kindergarten. And then I went out looking again, and I ended up completely, in a startling position, which was I became the executive director and CEO of Catholic Charities for the Diocese of Fresno, which was a big leap from a children's choir, but it was also a nonprofit. But it was 60 employees in 5 locations and $5 million budget. And when I got there, they were kind of falling off a cliff. From a financial standpoint. They had not had a current financial in 5 years. They were behind on their independent audits. They had all kinds of grantors that were knocking on their door for reports and things. And so I spent 5 years kind of rebuilding the general ledger and getting all the financials in order, and then bringing the the programs together under one roof, getting all the audits, the independent audits done, petitioning the IRS to give them, waivers on the $150,000 worth of penalties they owed because they hadn't filed taxes and all kinds of things. So we kind of pulled it back from the cliff. But the biggest thing for me was that I kind of have to have a passion center at the center of whatever I'm doing. I've kind of learned that as I go along. And for me, the children's choir was music. I grew up with music. And then for Catholic Charities, it really became helping people and not like giving a handout, but giving a hand up. That was kind of in my mind the most important thing, because I was really sensitive to people's human dignity and feeling like I wasn't diminishing their humanity by, saying they were less than or giving them something that they couldn't get for themselves. So I really struggled with the line out the door and around the block at Catholic Charities for that time period. And I wanted not only the employees of Catholic Charities, but the clients, as we spoke about them, to feel empowered to make changes in their life. But I couldn't ever kind of connect the dots. So then I went to work for a bank here in Fresno that is a community bank that was founded on the principles of the Great Game of Business. And it's really there that I discovered financial literacy training and leadership that really is about developing people. And for me, the light bulb went on, because I felt like the line never got shorter at Catholic Charities because they didn't have enough information. And they also had a lot of limiting beliefs. And so in a great game company, you are empowering everybody in the company to see what they can do to help move the company forward into a more sustainable, strong, financially, prosperous position,
Right.
because there's a stake in the outcome for every employee. So there's a share in whatever above and beyond sustainability that the company achieves, then they share it with their employees. And so that kind of was like the light bulb, the aha moment for me, that
Right.
when people are given the information and then respected and valued as human beings with their perspective and their life experience that they bring into the equation, then you have the mix for people to help create something and support it organically.
Wow.
And that engagement is really, based on human dignity and leading with the fact that people are humans first.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's unrealistic in our history and in the way the organizations have evolved, the leadership, top-down command and control, that assumes that people who are not in the decision-making seat are able to come to work and just be a worker only,
Right.
one-dimensional.
No voice.
Here's your job.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you what to do. Put your head down and do it. And don't think and don't look at the landscape. Just do what I tell you to do, because I know best, because I'm the leader. And
Right.
I think that, really recognizing that people bring their whole selves to the office, their life experience, their perspective, their vision. And if we value that and we find a way to foster and nurture the environment so they feel safe to share their ideas, and then we consider them and we move together towards something that's better for everyone, then we have really unlocked, I think, the key to what is going to be the future of leadership in our world.
Yeah.
I don't think the millennials are going to sit back and tolerate what you and I tolerated as women in industry early in the world.
Yeah.
And that glass ceiling concept is not going to be acceptable for this generation. They've grown up in an international world. They have information from all over the world, unlike me, who at 17 knew New York City and LA, and that was it.
Yeah.
They have a world view, and they're getting millions of bytes of information through Twitter and Instagram and all of those different areas, and they expect to be included in the process in their environment, in their job. And work-life balance, perspective choices are built into the way they think. And they were not for you and I would say. I mean, I just needed a job. I mean, I got home from college and my dad's question to me every single day until I got a job is, did you get a job yet today?
Yeah. And we were taught what to think, and they've been taught how to think. Schooling is even different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Let's move on to your next set of slides, and we can keep going, because just that whole concept of, the great game of life, or is it great game? How do you say?
The great game of business is the one of the systems of leadership that I really embrace and like. And I am a certified coach for Great Game, but I also coach just in general because it's not right for every company. And I think that there are opportunities to become better leaders that will still foster an incredible team if you allow people to be their full selves when they, not to have to bifurcate their life and say, okay, I'm at work, I can't think about anything at home. And for us to think that everything at home doesn't intersect with what we do at work is not a very realistic idea. And I think, nothing has driven that home more than all of us Zooming from home during the pandemic. How many conversations have you had where somebody's dog or their child or somebody came into the picture from outside of the conversation?
We just made like professional calls to different companies we are dealing with, like personally, right? The bank or whatever. And you can hear the little ones in the background.
Yes.
It's like, how's your day going? Oh, pretty good. Just those more human connections. And millennials have such a sense of humor. So some of these more millennial companies, even like on Stars. I think there's a sound on Stars and it goes like, oh, or something like that. It's just funny.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
for you.
the funniest one I've had so far is that I was on the phone with someone. It was a help desk for my cable company, and the person had a rooster. And it was like 4:00 in the afternoon where I am, but who knows what time it was there. And the rooster was going off about every minute and a half for a 45-minute call.
No.
And it sounded like the rooster was, in my house. It was so loud.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The background noise is louder than the person talking to you. Yeah,
exactly. It was pretty funny. But, just the reality of the pandemic and what that has brought home to leadership and to, all of these companies said, oh, we can't have remote workers. No. Everybody needs to be at the office. And then the pandemic hits and it's like, oh, everybody needs to work from home. And all of a sudden in, 2.5 weeks or a month, we have figured out how to be remote and how to embrace people's, ability to work from home. And
figure out how to reimagine. How about that?
Exactly. So humble leadership to me is just that, accepting that we can't always have the right answer. It may take a community to build that, and there's sayings out there that say, if you are in a room and you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And really understanding that being surrounded by others of wisdom is where you want to be, rather than I'm a leader, so I know everything and I don't need anybody to contribute to that. It's more of a openness to the value of all of the different people and what they bring to the table.
Cool. Now, do you know the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn?
No.
Oh, I wanted to tell you about that so bad and I forgot. It's like, okay, I'll just tell her on her interview, right?
Yeah. The Game of Life. Okay, I'm going to check it out.
The Game of Life and How to Play It.
Okay.
You'll enjoy that.
I'm writing it down as we speak.
All right. So, so the idea, like, we are perfectly imperfect, and that's like so much my lingo. It's like we can be like, especially as women, all up in our heads, and we aren't connected even to our heart, and it's like we can literally float around outside of our bodies. So like, get your soul into your body, get it down into your core where your physical strength is, in your abdomen area, and some people call that like the second chakra. And that's interesting because like Sex and Money, Power of the Second Chakra, that's one of my books.
I like it.
Embodied woman, perfect in imperfection. So tell us more about your idea of perfectly imperfect.
Well, I would say that perfectly imperfect is about acceptance and about seeing our flaws and not letting the voice of the inner critic make us bashful or afraid of admitting our flaws, or seeing them and recognizing that, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
There's two things that jump to my mind, and one is that I think I was in a circle that the book, the 5 Principles of Human Performance, was discussed, and it's a book that was written for the manufacturing industry. But there's a statistic that came out of that book which hit me between the eyes, which is the average human being makes 6 mistakes an hour, and in the context of manufacturing or in their job. And I thought, holy mackerel! If I had known that growing up, I would have allowed myself a little more room for imperfection. But I was a perfectionist, and even in my parenting, I was a perfectionist, always trying, And the second thing that comes to mind is, a saying that I read about criticism, and that when you criticize a child, they don't learn to hate you. They don't hate you. They learn to hate themselves. And I think in my heart of hearts, that has lived in my life. That has lived in my heart. It's like, I've had people say to me, oh, you're so hard on yourself. And, they obviously saw that strong drive of inner critic in me. And I think that, it's taken me 50 some odd years on this planet to recognize that some of the programming that we receive about being the best we can be can have a double-edged sword to it. And that, reaching for the stars is a good thing, but when you hold yourself to impossible standards like perfection, then you are kind of setting yourself up to always be disappointed in yourself, even when you do things that are beyond, that are great. And so perfectly imperfect to me is acceptance.
I love it. Very cool. Did you see Andrea Sanchez post on the word flossom?
Oh, yes, I did. That was great.
That was great, right?
Yes, it really, that's exactly it. We just have to accept that, we're flawed human beings, and, that's okay.
Yep.
That's
I
it.
think it was the Kennedy family that, like, if you didn't bring some new knowledge to the dinner table, you were in trouble. And there was another family that if you didn't bring at least one story of failure for your day, you were in trouble.
I love that.
They only wanted to hear like how you failed. Wasn't as big a deal.
It depends on how it was received, but I think the lesson in that is that we all fail, and
that was the idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because then the kids saw how much further and faster they could go, right? Yeah, I loved it. And you only fail when you are moving forward. You only fail when you're doing something new. You only fail when you're outside of your comfort zone.
That's true. If you don't ever push the boundary, you never know.
Never. Yeah. Oh, and the story that comes up for me is my I guess it would be like more like my dad's cousin, but it was one of those weird things. So older parents, and she was actually more my age. So we had babies real close together. She had hers first, and she did not let this baby fall. Like, it would be walking around furniture, she'd be like right there. And this baby got, babies, they get fat, they just got bigger and bigger. And it was a pretty big baby and didn't know how to fall. And it was more independent now, and she couldn't keep up. And this baby was getting hurt. And it's like, wow, right? How are you going to have the skills to fail if you aren't failing? And my kids were really smart, and so they didn't really fail much at all. And so when we start like a new game or something like that, a board game or whatever, they'd lose, and somebody's got to lose, right? And I did play games with them where there was no winning and losing when they were little, which maybe wasn't the best idea after all. Oh man, the fits that would go on, So then all of a sudden it's like, I get to teach my kids how to fail. So, somebody didn't win, then, we laughed about it. And yeah, that was interesting. And they got so much better. Yeah, that was good.
It's like the helicopter mom and the the concept of cocooning your child as a parent. And I think, our world is such that it's a requirement really to do a little cocooning, because when they're little, but as they get older, exactly. That's, that the media in general, however they get it, but the reality is they also need to learn to navigate and understand that they can't trust every single thing they see, think, or, or feel, or, experience. And so I think that there's a happy medium in that parenting. And I like to describe it as, I tell my kids, like, when you were little, you had a playpen, and you had freedom within the playpen, and then you got a little bit more, and a little bit more room, and a little bit more space. And now, an idea that my job was to get you to, adulthood without making a mistake that you could not survive. So, as long as you were, able to explore and, see how things happened and experience the world without the fear that you will die because of your choice.
Yeah.
It is a good thing for you to learn the consequences of your choices.
Yeah.
And I don't know that everybody shares that idea, but that's kind of, has worked really well for me, because I have 3 really independent, really autonomous sons that, at all of them in their own way have broken free of the mother mold. And we've had that conversation of, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to say, I've lived on this planet like 30 plus more years than you have, because I had my first son when I was 30. So just take a little bit of a moment and listen to maybe 30 years more perspective.
Ooh, nice.
Say, I'll consider it, Mom. And then go do whatever you choose to do. I respect your right to live your own life, but I love you, and I can't turn off the I'm going to run in front of a train for you if you need it, because I'm your mom. So
if you need it.
Yeah. If a train is coming after you and I can save you, I will do it because I love you. I'll throw myself in front of it, to save you. But I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to, give you the benefit of my wisdom and experience of my mistakes and my choices in life that I didn't like the outcomes of.
Yeah.
And then, but you get to evaluate all that. And all you have to say to me is, Mom, I'll consider it. And then just go and do what you want.
That's
and
so
it was a real pivotal moment, because, before that, how teenagers are. They're battling against you because they want that independence.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a great
transition. And they're so ADD, ADHD at that age with all their crazy hormones. And their brain, well, 2-year-old's brain is super disorganized in its wiring, because it's like overwired and then it prunes. And that's exactly what's going on in the teenage brain. And then the teenage, the 2-year-old's brain is pruning for organization. The teenager's brain is pruning for job, what they're going to do in life, kind of thing, or whatever that word is. I can't think of it.
Career?
The career choices. Yeah. So, I love that, letting go of ego. I kind of had a different spin with, especially my son. It was so much behavior, but one day I had him by the throat. It was the tip of the iceberg, and he was like 2. You got to know, like, when I signed him up for preschool, it was 2.5, and as I left the house thinking he was sleeping, he was throwing vaporizers out the window. We happened to have 2 vaporizers, and he happened to get into the attic. Yeah, it was serious. And so one day it went right over the top. I had him by the throat. I started to squeeze, and then all of a sudden I just threw my arm down and I went, "You are not worth going to jail for." So like, I kind of broke that cord a lot earlier on than you.
Oh yeah, it goes back to the Irish check part of me. Yeah, there was definitely some high-pitched words exchanged. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we got to the point where we were going to playgroup, and he was sitting under the slide throwing sand in all the kids' faces. Like, that's all he could manage that day. And I remember going home and the 2 of us sitting on the steps crying. It's just like, this is so hopeless. It was insane. Oh, it was constant. And if I had the energy, as I had a second one only 2 years later, right? So if I had the energy, I could have run my home like a preschool, and it would probably been fine. And when I did sign him up for preschool, I'd already taken him to a child development center and had him assessed, and this thick packet of paper, giving it to the gal who ran the preschool. And she goes, I'm not going to give this to the teacher. I will if I need to, but I usually just hang on to this stuff and we see how it goes. And I'm like, that is so education, like nothing preventive, right? And I'm like, whatever. My background's special ed, so that doesn't fly with me. Well, anyways, it worked out. He had a preschool teacher from Sri Lanka and 5 little boys in the class, and that was it. And he was an angel for her. Well, both my kids, we called it company behavior. They were really good outside. I got it all.
Yes.
Right. And so, anyways, he gets in the car with his like little preschool papers, and he turns to his little baby sister and he goes, "Here, Amy, you want to rip them up?" Because he knew she liked ripping things at that age. Whatever. We don't need your papers. We just need you out of the house for a few hours of the day.
Oh, that's so cute.
All right. So, any more on letting go of ego?
You know, it's just, I think it is all about not needing to be the person with all the answers and being open to what other people bring to the table. And, you know, not necessarily that you have to do everything that someone else suggests and that makes it better, but so that everybody has the feeling that they have been heard and that they have contributed and we've considered it and given, you know, a good thought to what they have presented.
I love it. And when you're in ego, you're not connected. And you're really thinking about things that are the negatives about other people, which are the things that don't connect us. And like, especially in depression, it's all about what's wrong, what's not working, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So
I think it's about
connecting soul to soul and heart to heart is important, isn't it? Go ahead.
Yes. I was just going to say, I think it is also about being a whole person that doesn't need affirmation from outside to recognize your value in the equation.
Yeah. And doing your inner work is the only way to get to that place.
Yep.
And then you know who you are and you're not dealing with imposter syndrome. That's another piece of
at least not in the moment.
Great. I love it.
I mean, I think I would be dishonest to say that we, you know, every moment of every day, I think, oh yeah, I can do this. I've got this, you know. It's
well, then you just step into your alter ego. Like for me, I just get some tight pants on because then I'm back in my dancer tights. I can do anything. I can get on stage. I can dance. I can sing. I can talk to people.
Yeah. I was listening to someone else speak recently, and they were talking about when you're little and somebody asks you, what are you going to be when you grow up? You know, the world is your oyster. I'm going to be president. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be Superwoman, whatever it is, or Wonder Woman. And your superpowers are real and possible and right there at you. And then as we get older, we start to, you know, as you were talking about, you know, reconnecting, rewiring the brain, we start to limit our, you know, ideals into what we think is possible and what we think we can do. And so then we start to say, you know, when somebody asks you in high school or college, what are you going to do for your career? Where are you going? What does your future look like? Starts to be a very hard question to answer because you have limited so many different things. And then I almost feel like as we go through life, it's a process of realizing that it's not about what we think we can't do. It's about what we think we can do, and that we have to almost go back to that mindset of a small child and say, okay, what brings joy? What brings deep fulfillment, and lean into that instead of meeting the practical application. At least that's been my journey. I mean, some people are wise beyond their years and they figure that out way earlier than I did. But I think that it is, you know, has been my journey to go back and say, okay, what is deeply fulfilling? What is that thing? And it all comes down to helping people. You know, for me, it's that interpersonal human relationship and how that fits into life on any level, but specifically in the context of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying the wording, I think, like what I think I should do, you know, at the more like college age. And there's 7 lies we tell ourselves. And one of them is, I think, because it's not true. When you're fully embodied, you know, and walking at the level of your soul is how I say it, then you don't use I think, you use I know, because intuitively we do, right? So and that's just another place like we're now really walking in ego by the time we get to college.
That's true. And Alicia Keys has been on a speaking tour because of her book. And she had a conversation with a couple, I've heard it now twice, and it's about her resounding yes. And, that evolution between being a teenager and then being on the world stage, like overnight, because she was on Oprah, and then having at that young age feeling like everybody else knows better what she should be doing and how she should do it. So she'll just kind of go with the flow and let these other people steer her life.
Right.
And then at some point she kind of, put her head up and thought, I don't really agree with all this. And this isn't really feeling comfortable. And so she had the luxury, as she says, of calling Oprah and asking her, how do you figure this out? And Oprah said, no one knows you better than you. And that really stuck with her. And so she was able to find her voice and really then started to think about alignment in terms of what is, like, we've all had that moment where somebody asks you something, to do something, to go somewhere, or to apply for something, whatever. And you have that resounding yes, like in your whole body, yes. Yep. Hell yes, this is like what I want.
Picking out an apartment or a house, you walk through that threshold or even see it online, or drive by and you're like, that's it.
Exactly. And so she's kind of using that as her pivotal decision making, in that when someone asks her and she doesn't have the resounding yes, it's like, oh, let me check my schedule, or I don't know, or what. If those are the things that pop up, then it's really a no.
Yeah.
And being able to navigate her life from the position of a resounding yes. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah. Her life is, if you put her next to Enya, it's like night and day. It is the coolest thing to study her life. I heard her, Alicia Keys, reading from her book. That was like so powerful. And and then Enya, there's like a documentary on YouTube. Jennifer Beats put it out for her weekly post one week. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like Enya just like, whatever happened to Enya? Nothing. Like, she's just rocking it. I mean, she doesn't feel she has to like be out there to be successful, and she is, and she doesn't. It is so beautiful, that kind of drastic comparison. Like, do it your way, it will work. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so being open to the wisdom of others. Yeah, so Alicia got in trouble doing that, and then there's a flip side on that in humble leadership. So tell us more.
Well, I think that her resounding yes is calling on her inner leadership, and I think that when we talk about the leader within, we have to have the right perspective, and that is, when you are in your ego, you need to be the smartest person in the room. You're not open to the wisdom of others, and you are expecting perfection of yourself, and consequently of all those around you.
Right.
But when you invert that and you are going from a position of humility and openness, it doesn't mean that you lean in and accept all of the wisdom of other people, but it means that you're willing to take it in. Just like I heard Alicia Keys and her resounding yes story, and it went, those are the words to my thoughts and feelings. Cool. And I think that that's what I mean by humble leadership, is that you lead, you have your feet firmly on the ground, and you are willing to explore and be curious about those things that drive you. And then also those things where you look back and go, kind of didn't do that right. But not with that punitive, I'm such a failure.
Right. Yeah. And, in my world, there's like being humble, and then there's like fake humility. And I know you don't, have that kind of this and that. So tell me more if someone brings up the term fake humility. How do you see that?
The word that pops right in my head is manipulation.
Okay.
And, you know, there are people that study different ways of leading with the sole purpose of manipulating the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, true organic leadership is about lifting and developing other people through a process of, you know, mutual education, you know, getting, you know, based in the value of trust and respect.
Yeah, and no threat, right? Like if you're truly a humble leader, then you know who you are and you don't have a sense of threat. You don't have a sense of, you know, what's the word? The word I want, it's like you're collaborating, you're not competing. Yeah. So you don't have this threat of competition. You're very open to collaboration.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So love, right? Tell us about love, darling.
Well, I think I am very heart-centered in every interaction in my life. And I think that's just the way God created me. I don't, it's not something I think about. And it's certainly, you know, it's funny, I just was taking a drink out of my water that I keep with
You're
me all the
drinking
time.
again, girl?
Yeah, drinking, it's water. But I think that, you know, I do that because I'm prone to emotion, you know, like I'm somebody that tears up pretty easily.
Okay.
And when I was going through my early career, you know, that is like the ultimate, you're a woman in a man's world.
Oh yeah, the Dahlia Feldman
when you start to cry in front of your boss, you pretty much lost all dignity and respect.
That's
you know,
Dahlia's story. Yeah.
and so for me, I learned very quickly that biologically it's impossible to cry while you're drinking water. So I am, you know, never without my Yeti.
That is so interesting because my brother would cry and my mother said, "Would you like a drink of water?" Yes.
Yeah, your mother had the innate wisdom there. But I think, you know, having compassion for my emotions and understanding, you know, we have a mutual friend, Mike Vacanti, who talks about, you know, he is also someone who is emotional and has moments of real emotion that he allows to come to the surface. And we discussed it, and he said, you know, I used to feel very intimidated and embarrassed that I, you know, had that proclivity.
Oh yeah, he's a jock.
and he said, but really what I recognize when I look back on my life is when I had those moments of pure emotion that came to the surface, those are like the highlight reel of my life. Those are the best times of my life. Cool. And, you know, I thought that is, you know, raw, true human emotion in its form, you know, is much broader than happy, mad, sad. And so we have to allow for that in our human interactions. And when we don't, when we are externally controlling it or controlling it, you know, mind over matter, if you will, we are not living at the fullest level that we can experience life.
Right.
And so open mindset of love, light is more about how you are open to the world. You're not trying to control the parameters in which you understand and experience the world based on what is acceptable. You are just being. You're accepting who you are and how you come to it. And so for me, it starts and ends with love, because I think that is when you have compassion for yourself, when you love yourself, when you love those around you, when you meet someone and you come to them with a countenance of mindset of love and opportunities to learn, grow, and exist, then you are not so quick to criticize or condemn or, you know, be cynical or suspicious of the other person's motives and things like that.
Very cool. So that's basically the mindset of love. Anything else you want to add to that?
I think, you know, it is, what is that? You have 32 muscles in your face. and it takes 2 muscles to smile and 30 of them to frown or something.
Oh
I can't
yeah,
remember
that's
exactly what the
incredible.
statistic is, but it's way more effort to be down,
Wow.
angry, upset, sad. And so for me, the lightness is that, when you come to things from a perspective of love and acceptance, you
Yeah.
are open and it's easier. It's
Yeah.
lighter.
Yeah.
It's less burden. And
That's
so it's heavy when you are looking at it from a position of negativity.
Yeah, the whole frown thing is, my friend just sent me a message. She was on a she was on a call, like she's in a mastermind group, and she goes, yeah, there's a woman on the Zoom call with a resting bitch face. And she just smelled a dirty diaper and she was trying to figure out what the baby ate. I'm like,
Yes.
girl, you are so funny. That's my friend that you need the mute button in the middle of the coffee shop. Good old Stina Marie. I love it. Okay, light. So when it comes to love, love definitely makes a burden a lot lighter, right? When you bring love to somebody who's struggling. Yeah, tell us more about light when it comes to love.
I think, it is about giving the other person the benefit of impartial listening,
Okay.
being open. And light is just what you bring to the table. Like, I am optimistic. I am, I have a light hand on this. I don't feel like I'm here to lower the iron fist. I'm having a conversation and I'm open, and I will listen, take it in, and really pause before responding, which has not always been my strong suit.
Okay.
I think the Irish tech thing works totally against me in that.
Right.
But I think I'm getting better at it, and it's all about changing little things and what is it? Acceptance. No, awareness is the first step.
Yeah, right. Do you remember the movie Under the Tuscan Sun? Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Love that movie.
I know. And so her friend has the baby in Italy, and she takes the baby to the window, opens the window, and brings the baby to the light, right? We're all from the light. We are all connected. And that's what I think of when I think of love and light. Yeah,
Yes.
it's just our divinity that connects us, and definitely helps with the whole humility thing, because in our divinity we are perfect, right? Yeah. Okay, very cool. All right, let's move on. Okay, so acceptance. All right, so what do you have to say about acceptance? It's like acceptance of self, we've talked about that.
Yep.
Acceptance of others. What else is there in acceptance in your mind?
I think acceptance is also just accepting the circumstance that you find yourself in, and then when you're trying to problem solve, it's about accepting that no one comes to a relationship or a job or a situation with the idea of being a loser or of not
accepted, right? I mean, don't you just die thinking back to grade school when they picked the team, and you're the last one picked, and I think that happens to everybody at one point.
Absolutely. But I think that in terms of your perspective, if you can acknowledge that, okay, both of us came here with the hope of being accepted.
Right.
And so what is my part of that? My part of that is to be open and to not, and I think growing up and going through the process of becoming more and more aware of other people's life journey and how that may impact how they show up. I think being in a position where you can only take care of you, and you can offer insights, and it may or may not be accepted in the same way that I was talking about my sons, consider it and then go on. I don't expect you to change your mind because I said
That was
something.
a
I expect you
good
to
one.
use your mind.
Yeah.
And so having that expectation as you sit down with someone that you're going to accept wherever they are. And if they come armored up, ready to have a battle, it doesn't mean you have to respond in kind. It means you need to acknowledge where they're at and then search for their gifts. Look for what they bring to the table that you can use in relationship to them to create common ground, to be curious about, tell me about this feeling, tell me about this experience, tell me, because I was someone who was very complicated. I got accused of that a lot, when I was younger and probably even more recently.
And complicated, too. Right there.
That you are complicated, and
now you've learned to be curious. I love that.
Exactly. And I think that people label or make judgments or assumptions about other people based on what they bring to the table. What was my life experience? So when someone comes with a steamer trunk full of stuff and that they haven't bothered to unpack, they're just carrying it along with them. It's a challenge from a leadership standpoint. And I think that our role is to, almost invoke the serenity prayer and let's accept what we can't change. Let's let's change what we can, and then hope that we have the wisdom to know the difference. But really, as leaders, you're a lightning rod for change, and that can be a really precarious position to be in with other people if you don't have the emotional intelligence to understand what they're bringing to the table and what their perspective is. And so I think that, that's a journey in and of itself, dealing with people and having, and there are some people that are gifted with it early in their life. And there's some people like me that had to learn it over a lot of hard mistakes.
Trial and error.
Yes, absolutely.
And shameful error too, it sounds like, right? So when you did make a mistake, it was shameful. So then you added shame to your so then you added shame to it. It's like, oh, why don't we just get out the matches for the oil and gasoline? Whatever.
Torch and ignite. There you go.
Yikes. Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I think it was just this year I kind of learned that you're curious to be curious piece. And another one is you're right. Right. So somebody says something and he's like, you totally disagree. And it's like, you're right. Because they are. It's their perspective and they're right. I was like blown away with that one. You're right. And then just, tell me more about it. I love your, tell me more about that. Brilliant.
Well, and the other one is if you think you can't do it, you probably can't. You're probably right.
See, you're right. I can't do that. You're right. Well, what was Kobe that was it Kobe or Kobe? I never say that name right.
Kobe Bryant?
Invented the Franklin planner.
Oh,
Covey?
I don't know. Covey. Stephen Covey?
Thank you.
Okay.
There's a story in one of his books about his son and the idea of what's the word? When you're encouraging, praise, and how detrimental praise actually is. And so his son was really lousy at softball or something, and he'd throw the ball and he'd praise him and say, oh, that was great, and kids aren't stupid, they know when they're lousy. So then he switched it to saying, oh, that was a little bit closer. Now stand this way. Let's see what happens, right? And just use more like noticing or whatever. But so that's another thing that just came up in this conversation we're having about, even praising people is probably not the way to go, right? And parent coaches talk about, instead of saying, oh, you did such a great job in the game, it's like, I saw when, you know, so and so almost tripped you, and you got around that, and then you took control of the ball, and you know, went 5 yards until and made sure you passed it on to so and so. You know, so yay, you were very much part of making that goal, or whatever.
Well, being very specific about your comments instead of broad-based, and also being specific as to the action, not the person. And
yes.
So,
oh my gosh, I learned. I mean, I just automatically, for some reason, did that. Maybe a special ed teacher or something. It was like, and it wasn't about them. It was about what they just did. Absolutely.
Well, and like the converse is true when you're correcting. You know, it's the behavior you're correcting. It's not that the person was wrong or is bad. It was a bad choice.
Yeah.
And so we make choices in our life. And if we've grown up with an inner critic that is speaking about our value instead of our the effort, whatever it is, the situation, the action, we are less likely to have the resilience to understand the difference between I did a bad thing and I am bad.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You know, and so in raising kids, you know, instead of saying, you know, good boy, it's
yes, it was
good
going
job.
there. I think that was our era. Good boy, good girl.
Yeah,
then it was good job. Yeah, and now it's all the noticing. Yeah.
And being specific. Yeah, you did that really well. I like the way you did that. And again, acknowledging that we each bring our gifts, and there's some things that we don't do well, and some things we do well, but that doesn't mean that we are lesser human beings. It means we are human beings.
Yeah.
And that in the mirror acknowledgement of being human, we are, you know, going to make mistakes in whatever it is.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on to the quote here. So, leading with heart, right? It's kind of what Neil Armstrong said when he stepped on the moon, right? Leading with heart is definitely one small step for man. And when we all lead with heart, it's one giant step for mankind, right?
I agree. That's a great context to put that quote in, because I think that, you know, we are all trying to do what we can to improve the experience of this world for the future generations. And I think the older I get, the more, you know, I'm focused on what are my children and my children's children inheriting, and what can we do to create foster a better environment. And I think, you know, we have, you know, not to get too deep in this, but I would say that as a society, we have tended to label certain things as good or bad, when I believe that it is more about how we interact as human beings that makes the result either positive or negative. And that it is not necessarily the concept that's wrong, it's the approach from our humanity. And so, you know, being part of raising consciousness, raising awareness, raising in terms of coaching through leading with heart, I think it could also be leading with humanity, you know, with our humanity, and accepting all of the things that each of us has to offer. Instead of diminishing someone else in order to raise our own value, we can raise everyone's value and not diminish each other or diminish our experiences or what we bring to the table.
Yeah, I love it. That's so cool. Thank you so much, Catherine. This has been wonderful.
Oh my goodness, Linda, I had a ball. Thank you. Good. It's, you know, a topic that's easy to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad we got connected through Humans First, right?
Me too. Yes. You know, like-minded people, and you and I know, believe in there is serendipity and just things that happen in your life, and I'm very, very grateful for the intersection of our lives.
Same here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.